Hi, I was just going to say about why diabetics need continued support, especially once they've received their tech. We already know how difficult it is to manage to get people with diabetes, especially those of us without any extenuating circumstances, different forms of tech. However, in the instances where it is possible to achieve access to pumps or different CGMs, we need continued support to feel less alone, especially when tech is relatively new, so isn't always the most reliable. Um, just because we didn't have to prick our fingers or inject, it doesn't mean that our diabetes is gone and that there is not still any issues. For example, I was given a Dexcom one just a month after my diagnosis, as finger pricking every day was making me really paranoid and quite anxious. I had to really push to get this, as initially I was under the impression that finger pricking was my only option. Um, I was never made aware of different CGMs existing. I didn't really know that they were a thing. Through little research, my team was unaware that the Dexcom I was given was not compatible with my phone. So this didn't work. I was having alarms go off for hours every day, saying that the Dexcom was disconnected. So I had to contact my team for help, and I received nothing in response. I ended up having to buy a whole new separate phone to find the one that was compatible, um, which was really expensive and could have been avoided. Um, if I was helped out and put on a new device instead. And then after my whole Dexcom One fiasco, I managed to get put onto the G7 instead, where um, after a while I randomly developed an allergy to its adhesive. Um, my skin was coming out in burns and infections. I had to go on 2 different rounds of penicillin, which then made me have to finger prick more often. Um, Finger pricking makes me quite paranoid about my blood levels, so I was ending up pricking my fingers about 30 times a day, which wasn't very healthy for me. Um, my actual diabetic team took over a month to get back to me on the issue. Um, I managed to contact Dexcom themselves about this, but there was nothing they could do about me being allergic, so I needed my own team to advise me on where to go from there, which just didn't really happen. Um, Eventually, I moved over thanks to another nurse who visited my school instead of going through the hospital. She managed to find a way for me to achieve funding for a pump despite me being almost 18 at the time. I started on an Omnipod 5 with the Libra 2 Plus. Although I prefer my pump, there were still quite a lot of teething problems with it. For example, my Libra didn't scan, the pump was disconnecting, and a few times my pump has made this weird alarm noise. It just hasn't stopped, and I've ended up having to physically destroy them, which I was given no guidance on at all. Um, my team didn't reply to me with any of the issues, even though the nurses that gave me the pump told me to contact them before I went through before I went through Omnipod. When I went for my clinic appointment, it wasn't even on my record that I'd moved over to a pump. They were still asking me what my ratios were for my long-acting insulin and my Fiasp. Um, I was just starting to feel quite let down by my team when, again, this could have been avoided. Just to conclude, I'm just one person who has had countless issues with my tech, and I've been ignored after receiving my pumps and various different CGMs. It can be quite scary having little trust in equipment that is designed to save your own life. So just please continue giving to support to patients with or without them having different technology or not.
Hi everyone, I'm Isabella and I'm going to carry on the conversation about support with technology. And this is during a change of technology. So I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes in June 2024, and I was given the Libra Freestyle 2 CGM to help manage my blood sugar levels. However, I wasn't informed about any other CGM options until I decided to do my own research. After a few weeks of using the Libra, I noticed several issues. My readings were often inaccurate, showing false highs and lows, even when my blood sugar levels were actually in range based on finger prick tests. The constant loss of connectivity and the frequent alarms were another source of frustration. As someone newly diagnosed, this made it incredibly difficult to navigate my new daily life, especially whilst working a full-time office job, as alarms would go off during meetings and at inconvenient times. At my 2-month check-in, I brought up these concerns with my diabetic team and asked about other CGM options, particularly Dexcom, which I had researched. My nurse was very understanding and offered me a trial of 3 Dexcom 1 Plus CGMs with the option to switch my prescription if I found them more suitable. After just 10 days of using the Dexcom 1 Plus, I experienced significant improvements, more accurate readings, no false alarms, and a much more manageable blood sugar monitoring experience. I requested that my nurse update my prescription, knowing that I still had 2 CGMs left, giving us about a 20-day window for processing. However, when I called my pharmacy to reorder, I was told that the Dexcom 1 Plus was actually out of stock at the supplier. By this time, my 3rd CGM had just expired, and this left me about a month without a CGM. This meant I had to revert back to manually checking my blood sugar levels, which was very stressful and anxiety-inducing. I even had to work from home for several weeks as I didn't feel safe going into an office or driving without my CGM. After a lot of back and forth between the pharmacy, my GP, my diabetic team, and a Dexcom representative, I eventually resolved the issue, and I was able to collect CGM from my local hospital to cover the gap whilst my prescription was finally being updated and ready for collection. Looking back, the entire situation could have been avoided with better support and communication. There was a lot of miscommunication, and the burden of resolving the issue fell upon me, which made me feel as if it was all my fault, which was a lot to take on as a newly diagnosed person. This experience has left me hesitant to ask for or try other diabetes technology in the future, despite knowing that there may be better options out there for me. I believe that when it comes to changing diabetes technology and prescriptions, it's crucial to have support throughout the process. There needs to be close management to ensure smooth transitions and timely availability of the necessary equipment. For those living with diabetes, the technology meant to make life easier should not be another source of stress.
So for me, my diagnosis story started in March 2021. And I was 14 years old, and I was just kind of in the middle of year 10 at school. So I was in the middle of doing my GCSEs and obviously started on MDI. At the time, it was very much, you didn't go on to any form of insulin pumps straight away, even in pediatrics. In my trust, it was you did a year or so on MDI, and then they'd look at putting you on an insulin pump. So when they eventually started talking about putting me on an insulin pump, I was on a Libra 2, and my team basically started talking to me in clinics and saying, how would you feel about going on to an insulin pump? I personally had a very good experience with being able to get onto a pump and access tech. I was very lucky in that respect. My consultant was absolutely amazing. I'm a very, as you can tell from this slide, from this table, me and my family made this. I was very aggressive with how I was treating my diabetes at the time. I was in the same boat as Lauren. I was finger pricking multiple times a day. I think at one point my Libra readings, I was checking 100 to 120 times a day, scanning it, which obviously it was a massive part of my life, and it was taking over a lot of my life. So my team was very much, okay, we need to get you onto this pump. So I was kind of weighing it up. And then, so go to the next slide then. So at the time, the things that were offered by my trust were Medtronic, I think it was a 640 at the time, T-Slim and Omnipod Dash. And they were very, that was it. That was the only choices I had. And due to a lot of my anxiety issues and the issues with being very tight with my control, I chose the Omnipod Dash. I was also training to be a swim teacher at the time, so I couldn't have a tube pump because the length of time I'm in the water, obviously, it can't be disconnected from insulin for that long. So I didn't really have much of a choice in terms of if I wanted to carry on swim teaching, I would have to take the Omnipod Dash. But then the other thing I made was this next one, which is a weighted pros and cons list. And I think this says probably everything you need to know about in terms of my control of diabetes at the time. Was it was literally weighted in terms of like scoring it and figuring out how and which would work the best for me and personally, which would, I suppose, in essence, make my life be a bit more normal, because I was so over the top and so tight with my control. So as you can see, for me, Omnipod weighed out very, very highly. I just, even if I wasn't swim teaching, I did not want to be connected to a pump, a tube. I didn't want to have the feeling of having something so medical attached to me, and to me, I felt like I had an IV connected to me all the time. So I did personally choose the Omnipod Dash. And then in July 2023, 2 weeks before I went on holiday, 2 weeks before my first abroad holiday since diagnosis, I got a call from my support worker at the time, and she was like, "We're starting to run Omnipod 5 trials." And then I got this email from my PDSN saying that I had a training session at this time. And I didn't really have a choice, but that was what we were working towards, me and my team at the end. So I was quite unusual that I went from a manual pump, and part of the reason I wanted to go onto the dash was to have that feeling of control, that I didn't have the auto corrections going in all the time. By just doing it by itself, that felt really alien to me, and me not being able to control it was very much not what I wanted. So then when they were like, we've got this, the Omnipod 5, would you like to try it? They put me on the first upgrade. And I ended up crying in Costa, which is an interesting experience. I was by myself at college eating lunch, and it was just this absolute wave of relief that I wasn't going to have to manage it all by myself all the time every day. And that was a massive change for me. So I think the next slide is, yeah. So I think there was 4 specific things that I found very different between manual and hybrid closed loop. Was that there were so many. I didn't realize, moving from manual to hybrid closed loop, how many changes there would be to pre-bolusing and insulin sensitivity. So when I was on the Omnipod Dash, I was pre-bolusing 45 minutes for breakfast. So I'd have to wake up, get my insulin, and wait 45 minutes for it to work. And now I'm on the 5 and have been for almost 2 years now. It's so much just literally put the insulin, wait 5 or so minutes, and I can just get started on eating. My fast acting insulin changed, so I went from Fiasp to Nova Rapid, which was an experience, from being on MDI and then being allowed to have Fiasp in the Omnipod Dash, having to not be able to have access to that because obviously it's not approved for the algorithm. That was an adjustment that was hard. Again, the auto corrections, or control IQ, that's what the other pumps call it. I found that a very difficult thing to learn, to not have that full control all the time and have to let it go a little bit. And as much as that's what I wanted, I found that really difficult to be like, there's something going into my body that I can't control, without just switching it into manual mode all the time. Obviously, we don't want that, and I would have had the pump taken off me if I'd done that. But that was definitely something that I really had to learn to just leave it alone and to just trust it, which was a major adjustment for me. And then obviously the communication with the G6. So I was put onto the Libra 2 3 months after diagnosis. And then when I went on to the Omnipod 5, obviously they wanted me to be in a closed loop with that. So they put me onto the G6, I think 2 weeks before. So I had to learn how to use these 2 pieces of new tech together. And I've been very lucky that both of the sensors I've had have been very accurate. and I've not had major issues with it. And I think the G6 is kind of well known to be one of the most accurate sensors you can get and one of the most reliable sensors you can get. So I've been very lucky to be able to be on it for that long. So yeah, it was definitely a very big adjustment, even though I was just going for a pump upgrade. It was very much a learning to just have to be a bit more hands off and have to just take a step back and say it's okay. It does know what it's doing. It's not just making these numbers up. It we can be a bit more hands off and we can just let it do its thing. And I've been able to do so many more things with that and just be able to just let it go and to give it its own time. Which, yeah, I think that's I was very lucky to be able to have that step in terms of going from not having to inject, but then being given my own time to accept that I can have the help from the pump and not have to be hands-on with everything myself all the time.
Hello everyone, my name's Iona, and my section is mostly about kind of knowing our options and kind of having the information that we need in order to make the right choices for us and our control. So, as we're all very aware, each clinic has their own funding for different pumps, and no two clinics are going to have the same pumps on offer. And there definitely needs to be that sort of transparency in the lead up to getting a pump for young people. In my experience, when I first went on a pump back in 2017 or 2018, my options were very limited. At the time, it seemed like other people that I knew in the kind of type 1 community had access to 4, 5 different pumps, ranging from tubeless to tubed pumps. And I think at the time, my only options were an Accu-Check one and the Medtronic one. And I wasn't really given much information at the time. It was kind of pushed a little bit in that if I wanted a pump sooner, I'd have to go for the Medtronic one because not enough people wanted the other one. So it was sort of, in order to get the training and the pump sooner, I'd have to go for the Medtronic, and thankfully that probably would have been the one I'd have chosen looking back now anyway. But I wasn't really given much information prior to the training sessions, and kind of just showed up on the day knowing that it was a Medtronic pump and that was about it. However, when I got my most recent pump, so I went on the hybrid closed loop trial back in, I think 2021 or 2020. And the options were a lot more clear. I was given a lot of information on the 2 different pumps that they were trialing in my area. So it was the Tandem T Slim and the Medtronic, I want to say 780G. And I kind of knew already that I wanted to go on the Tandem T Slim, just because I really liked the idea of going on the Dexcom. And from all of the information that I was given prior to the training sessions, I felt like I was really able to weigh up my options and make a proper informed decision to go forward for that pump, especially because hybrid closed loop was so new. I really wanted to make sure that I could make the right choice, knowing that it might not go 100% smoothly, but knowing that it could really change my life for the better. So that was definitely a better experience going on to new tech. More recently, I think probably middle of last year, end of last year, my prescription was quite suddenly changed from the Dexcom G6 to the G7. I think it was when the compatibility with the tandem swapped over. But I wasn't consulted on this and kind of just got a text message saying that my order had been shipped and it had been changed over to the G7. Now, this was definitely something that I'd have gone for anyway, but it would have been nice to talk through what the difference was and why I was being changed over to it before getting that prescription come through. And I think that's especially important for young people because diabetes management can cause so much anxiety, and not having information on tech that kind of not controls our lives, but controls our diabetes, it holds a lot of kind of emotion for us, I think. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about was kind of blood glucose monitors, and having a choice over what blood glucose monitors we want to use, because there are hundreds of them out there. But it seems to be that our GPs kind of just give us the monitors that they have funding for, and they change quite often. And that means then that things like test strips get changed quite often, and can make it quite confusing having to get used to this technology. I mean, my previous one, I had separate ketone monitors and blood glucose monitors. And then about a month ago, my GP sent me out a different one because my original one broke, and this one does both at the same time. And that was quite an adjustment, trying to get used to having both strips and making sure that they were always ordered. And yeah, I think the most important thing for me when it comes to tech is having all the information to make the right choices and be able to make informed decisions and give that kind of informed consent to this technology. Because when it goes wrong, it can go really wrong, but when it goes right, it can be life-changing. So, yeah, thank you.
This was written by another young leader who unfortunately couldn't present tonight, but Lauren has offered to share this on behalf of that young leader. So Lauren, if you'd like to take over from now.
Hi, so I'm reading in for Amelia, and she was saying that having a choice about technology is a topic that she finds really important to her. She was diagnosed just over 2 years ago now, and for the first year and a half, she was saying to me, even to me, that she didn't really want to pump at all. Her reasoning, although she was never really given the opportunity to speak to her team about this, was that she does a lot of dancing and sports, and she found it would be easier to do that without a pump attached to her. She was concerned that getting a pump would mean tubing would get caught and things, and she was just scared and anxious about it in general, even though she didn't really want to admit that. She thinks the fear comes from like being out of control with the idea of a pump and its like possibility of it failing. And she just didn't feel well if she was out of control. The idea of wanting a pump was never actually raised by her team, so she never really had the possibility to even voice these concerns. And then after about a year and a half of her diagnosis, she became closer with people who also had diabetes, who ended up having all different types of pumps. And kind of through speaking to us, she realised that she might like the idea of having a pump and wanted to look into the possibility, as maybe the positives did outweigh the negatives and her anxiety around it. And then sort of out of nowhere, really, she became eligible for a pump, and her hospital team gave her the different pump options for her area, and just kind of left her on her own to let them know what she wanted. At no point, though, was she asked if she actually wanted to move on to a pump. She was given no opportunity to talk to anyone about her anxieties around it, and she thought that maybe the opportunity would come up once she was going through training for the pump, but by that time the decision's already been made and it's too late, and those anxieties haven't gone away, and the chance to talk about them to the professionals does need to happen sooner. She knows that she could have possibly raised this with the team and told them she was anxious about getting a pump, but that shouldn't have to be on the young person to bring these up. They should be considered and addressed from the very start. She thinks it's important to remember that just because technology is advancing and can be so helpful for so many people, that doesn't mean that actually everyone wants it, and it may not be compatible to their lifestyle. And maybe people do need it, especially to improve their health. But there needs to be more consideration to the fact that it can be quite a scary time because you are putting your life on the line for a piece of technology that could go wrong, which is quite scary. Diabetes in general does take a long time to adjust to. So when it feels like you're having to relearn how to keep yourself alive, it can be quite daunting and it is quite scary. And these feelings can be made so much worse if you don't feel like you're given enough knowledge or a place to share your concerns with your team. So yeah, that's kind of everything that Amelia said.
Okay, so hi everyone, my name's Sophie. I'm 20 years old and I've had type 1 diabetes for 6 years. And before the session, I just organised a really short mini survey for young leaders to kind of find out what we as young leaders want you as healthcare professionals to know and how you can support us, especially when we're struggling with our diabetes, and to hopefully give you some takeaways from the session. Sorry about out of breath, I just had to run up the stairs to turn the Wi-Fi back on. Next slide, please, Adam. So the first question I asked young leaders was, what are you struggling with when you're feeling low with diabetes? And the main kind of themes that came up were the pressure of managing diabetes and everything that comes with that, the feelings of being overwhelmed or misunderstood or judged, especially in connection to diabetes management, and maybe if it's not where you want it to be. Struggling with mental health, diabetes, and the burden of it day to day, and the feelings of being burnt out and potentially frustrated of the fact that we're different having type 1. We do stand out to other people and we have to put more effort in day to day, and this can be a huge burden for us and it can make us feel low about our diabetes. So just to pick out a few quotes, these are taken straight from the survey. So we have managing everyday life in addition to diabetes, feeling overwhelmed and misunderstood or judged, difficulty to motivate yourself to take care of bloods when other things are going on or in a bad place mentally. We've got feeling guilty for having high sugars, anxious about going out and doing things, not wanting to do anything. Struggling to control levels, which makes me think badly about my diabetes, and this affects my relationships with friends and people around me. And then struggling with eating, exercising, inputting insulin sometimes because you just eat and forget. So even something that's so basic, such as eating or eating healthily, or something like changing a site, which might normally take 5 minutes, when we're feeling low with our diabetes, it can be like the biggest challenge ever for us to do, and the emotions that come with that as well can just increase the burden of diabetes. Next slide, please, Adam. So the second question that I asked was how does diabetes technology affect you when you're already struggling with diabetes? So I've put the positives in the yellow speech bubble and the negatives in the blue. So the overall idea for how technology can positively help us is that it acts as a support system and relieves some of the stress regarding blood sugar management. And this is in particular connection with the closed loop systems and smart technology. The survey found that we might feel a little bit more safer to kind of let the tech take over for a little while if we're really particularly struggling. And then on the negative side, the survey found that technology can be a huge reminder of our diabetes. It amplifies how we already feel because we can't stop looking after the tech. We have to look after the tech for it to look after us. And if that means we have to stop everything to do a pump change or to recalibrate our CGM, then we have to do that. That's not something we really have a choice in. And we still have to listen to all the beeping and everything like that. It never stops, and that can be really overwhelming. So to pick out a few of the specific responses, we had struggling with the visibility of an insulin pump compared to injections. So just that like visual reminder of you're different to other people. You've got an insulin pump. When you're already struggling with diabetes, that might be something that we really struggle with. Maybe we want to cover it up more in that particular time because we don't want that reminder. As I mentioned before, the sounds that come with it, especially at night, I find like that's when we need them, I would say, the most to wake us up. And the absolute frustration that I feel when I hear that sound sometimes, it's just, you can't even imagine. Sight changes when you're already struggling. It could be like the evening, you've put it off and off and off, you just really don't want to do it. There's a lot of like emotional stuff sometimes that comes with just having to do it. And then especially when technology fails as well, it can feel like we're losing control over our diabetes. And then that can lead to feelings of anger and annoyance. I think especially from when diabetes technology fails, we rely on it, it's our life support system, and it can be really, really scary when that doesn't work. And then finally, having easy accessibility of our CGM data, our pump data, can amplify everything else, how we're feeling. Having the numbers right on our phone is not necessarily always a good thing, especially when we're feeling really burnt out and down. Maybe we're really struggling to manage our blood sugars. It can make us feel guilty. So it can just heighten that frustration that we might already be feeling. Next slide, please. And then the last question, I really wanted to kind of give something to you guys as healthcare professionals to take away from the session. So I've asked our young leaders, what can you do to help us when we're struggling? So the first kind of, the left-hand side is kind of about the language that we use in clinic and how we come away feeling. So trying to avoid making us feel guilty or judged about our blood sugar management, trying to keep appointments less focused on the numbers, looking at us with more of a rounded view, a holistic view, kind of maybe thinking more about why are our numbers like that, rather than kind of nitpicking like certain times where maybe our blood sugar was really high. So helping us work, like this one says here, helping us work through our feelings mentally and physically and placing no blame on us or question our decisions. We live with this condition every day, and sometimes we don't get it right, but there might be a reason for that. And unless you ask, you're not going to know. And I really like this one in green here, recognizing and reassuring. So recognizing that it's very normal to feel low and it's part of living with a chronic health condition, and reassuring us that it won't be difficult all the time. So I think avoiding looking at the data and more of that recognition and reassurance is what we need when we're struggling. Even if it's an appointment where we never look at the numbers, we've had a really great conversation about how we're feeling, that's going to leave us feeling more positive after the appointment and potentially feeling more motivated to manage our blood sugars better. And then on the right hand side, there's a few more perhaps practical support that could be implemented in clinics. Obviously not all of these are possible, but in an ideal world, this is maybe what young leaders would want. So we've got a hotline for managing diabetes and mental health. If a hospital has a psychologist, then referrals to them. And also a service that could make healthcare professionals more accessible between clinics. I think so often that's when we struggle the most, and we are quite good at hiding how we feel. If we don't want to talk, then we won't. We're not always open, and also clinics not really always an environment where we're wanting to open up, especially if it's someone we don't know that well. So I think especially between appointments, having somewhere or some way we can contact people to let them know we might need a bit of additional support could be something that's really useful to us. So hopefully those can kind of help you take away something from this session, and I'll now hand back to Adam, who will round up the session. Thank you.